In this video you'll learn an easy way to create a chord progression from scratch to add harmony to a vocal, an acapella or any other melodic line. This is very useful for creating a new context around the vocal melody and can be used for remixing. Essentially you will see how I created an instrumental that works well with the vocal sample. And the foundation of this would be the chord progression, but I will also show you how I created some other bits, such as the bass line. This tutorial is beginner friendly and is mostly intended for people with very little knowledge of music theory, although at least some knowledge is required, such as knowing the name of each note on the piano and knowing what a scale, a chord and a key is. So let's get right into it. Okay, so I'm gonna be using this sample for this session. It's a sample that I got from Loop Cloud.
You bring me joy, baby, don't you go, don't go nowhere. You bring me joy, baby, don't you go, don't go nowhere.
But before we get into the good stuff with writing chord progressions and all that, we need to make sure that the sample is aligned to the grid of our project. So first of all, I've set the tempo of my Ableton Live project to be the same tempo as the sample, 124 BPM. However, if we turn on the metronome,
you bring me joy, baby, don't you go, don't go nowhere.
We can clearly hear that the sample is not synchronized to our project. So first thing we need to do is find the first beat of the phrase that the vocalist is singing. So that would be the word joy in this case. So that part where it says you bring me, this thing comes before the first beat of the phrase. So one thing we can do is we can move the sample on the timeline. But in Ableton Live, what I like to do is right click on the actual part that I want to set as first beat, choose the option set 1.1.1 here.
Joy, baby, don't you go, don't go nowhere. You bring me.
So it's perfectly synchronized now. So once we've done this important bit, finding the first beat of our musical phrase, and you can actually listen to the original instrumental if you're using an acapella, it will help you get some context about where the actual phrase starts. But let's go on with making chord progressions. The key of the sample is F minor, so I go to autochords.com, choose F minor, and it shows us all chords in key, and you can experiment with those as much as you want to create your custom chord progressions. For this example, I'm gonna be using one of the preset progressions that they're offering. This is the first one where it says main progression. And so this is F minor, C minor, D flat or C sharp, which would be a major chord, and B flat minor. So first thing we need to do is we need to copy the chord progression in our DAW. And I have already done this, and this is basically how it would sound if we use this basic generic progression. You see F minor, C minor, D flat major and B flat minor, and we repeat it 2 times to cover the whole vocal phrase. And as you can see, each chord is played for 1 bar, so it's pretty simple.
Joy, baby, don't you go, don't go nowhere. You bring me joy, baby, don't you go, don't go nowhere.
So this is just basically copying the chord progression from autochords.com, and as a basic chord progression it kind of does the job, but let's make it a bit more interesting. And so in this next clip what I've done is I've reshuffled the chord to play in a way that enhances the vocal and that works with the vocal better. So as you can see, this F chord lasts for 2 bars in the beginning to underline this joy word that's in the beginning of the musical phrase. And then we get the C minor and the B flat minor. And when the vocal phrase is repeated, we again start with F minor and C minor, but the last chord this time is D flat major, just to add more variety and make it work better with the vocal.
Joy, baby, don't you go nowhere. You bring me joy, baby, don't go nowhere.
So this one is a bit more expressive than the previous one, but let's get into the next version, which adds the sevenths to the chords and makes them sound a bit more colored and just richer and nicer. Adding a seventh to a chord is pretty easy. One way to do it on a minor chord is to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 semitones from the root note. While on the major chord, which would be this one, the D flat chord, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 semitones from the root note. And so for the next version of this chord progression, I'm gonna add some inversions. I will invert some of the notes so that the chords flow into each other in a more smooth manner. However, let's first check out the bass line and how it works with this chord progression. So to see the bass line together with the chords, we can select two clips in Ableton Live. As we open our clip editor, we can switch between the orange clip, which is the bass line, and the purple clip, which is the chord progression. And so as you can see, the bass line, it mostly plays the root note of the chord. Under the first chord, it plays mostly F. With the second chord, it plays mostly the C. I mean, you can play some other notes as well here and there, but the main note, the one that is played most of the time, is the root note of the chord. Then we go to B flat, then again F, C, and D flat. Let's hear how it sounds.
Joy, baby, don't go nowhere. You bring me joy, baby, don't go nowhere.
Oh, by the way, if you're enjoying the video, definitely make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. Drop a comment if you have any questions. Let's get on with the tutorial. So as you can hear, the rhythmic part of the bass line is really important. The bass is a very rhythmic instrument, so to create an interesting bass line, you need to have a rhythm that plays well with your other elements and mostly with your drums, which we will hear in a second. But let's go one step further with this chord progression. Let's check out the inverted chords. And as you can see with this chord progression, some of the notes are transposed an octave lower or an octave higher in order to make them flow better into one another. And this helps with what's called voice leading. So for example, with this C minor chord that we have on the third bar here, what I've done is I have transposed the seventh, which would normally be here. I've transposed it one octave down, which is basically what I've also done for this B flat chord, transposed the 7 an octave down. And here with this second C minor chord, I've transposed both the 5th of the chord and the 7th of the chord. So these two top notes, I've transposed them one octave down so that they're closer to the final chord, which would be the D flat chord. And let's listen with the bass.
Baby, don't go nowhere. You bring me joy. Baby, don't go nowhere.
Okay, so let's hear the vocal in the context of the whole instrumental. A couple of things that I did that I want to note is that I've copied this vocal. I copied the audio track and I've created a harmony of the vocal. So this is the original vocal. And this next version of the vocal is transposed +7 semitones, so it creates a perfect fifth on top of the vocal. Here's how it would sound by itself. So here's how the vocal sounds.
Joy, baby, don't go nowhere.
Something else I've done, I've copied my chord progression, I used the final progression, the inverted one. The main one uses a Rhodes piano. By the way, all these synths that you're hearing in this instrumental come from my Synth Hop Essentials Ableton Live pack, which you can check out from the link down in the description of the video if you want to get these very, very useful bread and butter sounds. So I've copied the piano and I'm using one of the synths. So it basically plays the same chord progression along with the Rhodes piano and creates a bit more interest, adds a bit more flavor to the beat. And I have added drums, percussion, some licks with, again, with the Rhodes piano. And in the final part, we have the synth lead. Let's have a listen.
Joy, baby, don't you go nowhere. You bring me joy, baby, don't you go nowhere. Joy, baby, don't you go nowhere. You bring me joy, baby, don't you go nowhere. Baby, don't you go nowhere. You bring me joy. Baby, don't you go nowhere. Baby, don't you go nowhere. You bring me joy. Baby, don't you go nowhere. You bring me joy. Baby, don't you go nowhere. You bring me joy. Baby, don't you go nowhere. You bring me joy. Baby, don't you go nowhere. You bring me joy. Baby, don't you go nowhere.
So this video is over, but if you're interested in more similar tutorials, check out this video. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.